Holy books of the Hindus. The Vedas. The Vedas collectively refers to a collection of written texts of ancient Indo-Aryan religious literature that are associated with Vedic civilization and are considered by adherents of Hinduism to be revealed knowledge. Hindus believe that Vedas were not written by anyone, including God, but are eternally existing and authorless. While many historians regard the Vedas as some of the oldest surviving texts, they estimate them to have been written down between 1500 BCE and 500 BCE. The Vedas consists of several kinds of texts, all of which date back to the ancient time. The core is formed by the mantras, which represent hymns, prayers, incantations, magic, and ritual formulas and charms, etc. The hymns and prayers are addressed to a pantheon of gods such as Rudra, Varuna, Indra, Agni, etc. These mantras are supplemented by texts regarding the sacrificial rituals in which these mantras are used, as well as texts exploring the philosophical aspects of the ritual tradition, narratives, etc. The Vedas are perhaps the oldest written text and are the earliest literary records of the whole Aryan race. They are supposed to have been passed through oral tradition over 100,000 years, and they came to us in written form between 4 to 6,000 years ago. Vedas are amongst the most ancient religious texts still in existence. The great compiler of the Veda and Puranas was Vyasa Krishnan Dvaipayana. He was said to be the 28th of the Vyasas, or compilers of Vedic knowledge. He was somewhat older than the avatar Krishna, and his work continued after the death of Krishna. Krishna Dvaipayan Vyas divided the Vedas into 4 parts and taught them to his disciples. He is often referred to as quote-unquote Veda Vyas, as he is believed to have arranged the single eternal Veda into 4 parts. The word Vyas refers to compiler, arranger, and also means separation, division, etc. The festival of Guru Purnima is dedicated to Veda Vyas. It is believed that Veda Vyas was born in the Mauli of Tanahun district, which is now in Nepal. The ancient cave that he wrote Mahabharata is still in existence in Nepal. There is a Vyas municipality in Tanahun district located in Gandaki province in Nepal, named after Vedavyas. The Vedas are divided into 4 groups: Rigveda, Yajurveda, Soma Veda, and Atharvavida. Each group has an original text, mantra, and a commentary portion, Brahmana. The Brahmana again has 2 portions, one interpreting ritual and the other philosophy. The portions interpreting the philosophy of the original texts constitute the Upanishads. The 4 Vedas are the Rigveda. The Rigveda Samhita is the oldest significant surviving text. It is a collection of 1,028 Vedic Sanskrit hymns and 10,600 verses in all, organized into 10 books, or in Sanskrit, mandalas. The hymns are dedicated to Rigvedic deities. The books were composed by sages and poets from different priestly groups over a period of at least 500 years. The Rigveda was composed roughly between 1700 and 1100 BCE, the early Vedic period, in the Sapta Sindhu region of the Indian subcontinent. There are strong linguistic and cultural similarities between Rigveda and early Iranian Avesta, deriving from the Proto-Indo-Iranian times, often associated with the Andronovo culture. Rigveda means the Veda of adoration and mostly contains verses adoring or adulating deities. But it also dealt with other subjects like the procedure of wedding, the folly of gambling, etc. About 2/3 of Rigveda is about the gods Agni, fire, and Indra, the ruler of all the gods. Other Rigvedic gods include Rudra, the two Ashvins, Savitar and Surya, Varuna, the Maruts, and the Ribhas. There are references to a divine creeper, the Soma, whose juice was an energizer. Some animals like horses, some rivers, and even some implements like mortar and pestle were deified. The Rig Veda contains a sense of intimate communion between nature and the rishis or visionaries. According to some, the concerns of Rig Veda are those of simple, nomadic, pastoral Aryans. According to the others, the people in the times of the Rig Veda had a settled home, definite mode of life, a developed social customs, political organizations, and even arts and amusements. Rig Veda is one of the oldest, largest, and most important of the Vedas, containing 10,000 verses, forming 10,017 poems in 20 groups. 2. Soma Veda. The Soma Veda is the Veda of chants, or knowledge of melodies. The name of this Veda is from the Sanskrit word saman, which means a metrical hymn or song of praise. It consists of 1,549 stanzas, taken entirely except 78 from the Rig Veda. Some of the Rig Veda verses are repeated more than once. Including repetitions, there are a total of 1,875 verses numbered in the Soma Veda. Its purpose was to serve as a songbook for the writer, priests who took part in the worshipping process. A priest who sings hymns from the Soma Veda during a ritual is called the Udgat, a word derived from Sanskrit root Udgai, which means to sing or to chant. The hymns were to be sung according to certain fixed melodies. Soma Veda consists of a selection of poetry mainly from the Rig Veda and some original matter. It has two parts, Purva Archika, first adoration, and Uttar Archika, later adoration, containing verses addressed to the three gods Agni, fire, Indra, the king of gods, and Soma, energizing earth. The verses are not to be chanted anyhow, but to be sung in a specifically indicated melodies using the 7 svaras or notes. Such songs are called samagana, and in this sense, Soma Veda is really a book of hymns. Yajurveda. The Yajurveda, or Veda of sacrificial formulas, consists of very old written mantras and also in part of the verses borrowed from the Rig Veda. Its purpose was practical, in that each mantra must accompany an action and sacrifice, but unlike the Soma Veda, it was compiled to apply to all sacrificial rites, not merely the Soma offering. There are two major revised versions of this Veda known as the Black and White Yajurveda. The origin and meaning of these designations are not very clear. The White Yajurveda consists only the verses and sayings necessary for the sacrifice, while explanations still exist in a separate Brahmana work. It differs widely from the Black Yajurveda, which incorporates such explanations in the work itself, often immediately following the verses. Of the Black Yajurveda, 4 major revised versions arrive, all showing by and large the same arrangement, but differing in many other aspects, notably in the individual discussions of the rituals, but also in matters of phonology and accent. Yajurveda refers to acts of worship such as offering made into Agni or fire. It has two branches, Krishna or black and Shukla or white. While both contains mantras or incantations to be chanted at rituals, Black Yajurveda also has many explanations. The recensions of Black Yajurveda are Taittiriya, Kataka, Maitrayani, and Kapishthala. Those of White Yajurveda are Madhyanadina and Kanva. The literary value of Yajurveda is mostly for its prose, which consists of short, terse sentences full of meaning and cadence. The Atharvavida. The Atharvavida also contains material from the Rigveda. The Atharvavida was written down much later than the rest of the Vedas. Atharvavida means the Veda of the wise and the old. It is associated with the name of the ancient poet Atharvan, legendary Vedic sage. It is also called Atharva Angirasa, being associated with the name of another rishi, Angiras. Although later in age, the Atharvaveda reveals a more primitive culture than the Rigveda. The custom is to enumerate Yajurveda, Soma Veda after the Rigveda and mention Atharvaveda last. Atharvaveda consists about 6,000 verses forming 731 poems and a small portion in prose. Atharvaveda contains first-class poetry coming from visionary poets, much of it being glorification of the curative powers of herbs and waters. Many poems relate to disease like cough and jaundice, to male and female demons that causes the diseases, to sweet-smelling herbs and magic amulets which drive away diseases. These are poems relating to sins and their atonement, errors in performing rituals and their expiatory acts, political and philosophical issues, and a wonderful hymn to Prithvi or Mother Earth. Upanishads. The Upanishads are regarded as a part of the Vedas, and as such, it forms part of the Hindu scriptures. They primarily discuss philosophy, meditation, and the nature of God. Upanishad means the inner or mystic teaching. The term Upanishad is derived from upa, near, ni, down, and shad, which means to sit, which means it is sitting down near. Group of pupils sit near the teacher to learn from him the secret doctrine. The Upanishads are sacred texts of spiritual and philosophical nature. The earliest Upanishad may have been composed between BC 800 and 400. There have been several later editions leading to 112 Upanishads being available today. But the major Upanishads are 10 Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitariya, Svetashvatariya, Chandogya, Brihadaryanaka. The teachings of Upanishads are those of Bhagavad-Gita, forming the basis of the Vedanta philosophy. The Isha Upanishad emphasizes the identity of the human soul with the divine soul. The Kena Upanishad discusses the qualities of the divine essence, Brahman, and the relationship of the gods to the divine essence. The Katha Upanishad, through the story of Nachiketa, discusses death and the permanence of the soul, Atman. The fairly long Chandogya Upanishad develops the idea of transmigration of souls. The Brihadaryanaka Upanishad, the longest of the Upanishads, bears the message of the completeness of the divine essence and the associated peace. The Upanishads elaborate on how the soul, Atman, can be united with the ultimate truth, Brahman, through contemplation and meditation, as well as the doctrine of karma, the cumulative effects of a person's actions. Upanishad means Brahma knowledge, by which ignorance is loosened or destroyed. The Upanishads more clearly set forth the prime Vedic doctrines like self-realization, yoga and meditation, karma and reincarnation, which were hidden or kept veiled under the symbols of the older mystery religion. The main figures in the Upanishads, though not present in many of them, is the sage Yajurveda. Most of the great teachings of the later Hindu and Buddhist philosophy derive from him. The Puranas. The Puranas are post-Vedic texts which typically contain a complete narrative of the history of the universe from creation to destruction, genealogies of the kings, heroes, and demigods, and description of Hindu cosmology and geography. There are 17 or 18 canonical Puranas divided into 3 categories, each named after a deity: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There are also many other works termed Purana, known as Upapuranas. The epics, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, are the epics of Hinduism. They are probably the longest poems in any language, and the Mahabharata, attributed to the sage Vyasa, was written down from 540 to 300 BC. The Mahabharata tells the legend of Bharatas of Vedic Aryan group. The Ramayana, attributed to the poet Valmiki, was written down during the 1st century AD, although it is based on oral tradition that goes back 6th or 7th centuries earlier. The Ramayana is a moving love story with moral and spiritual themes that has deep appeal in the Hindu society to this day. Hindu sacred text, the Bhagavad-Gita, is embedded in Book 6 of the Mahabharata. Ramayana of Valmiki. Ramayana is an ancient Hindu epic poem which narrates the struggle of divine Prince Rama to rescue his wife from demon king Ravana. The structure of Srimad Valmiki Ramayana is arranged into 6 chapters. Ramayana consists of 24,000 verses, slokas, arranged into numerous cantos, sarga, which are contained in 6 books. Sage Valmiki narrates the life of Rama. It follows Rama's 14-year exile to the forest from his kingdom by his father King Dasratha on the request of his second wife, Kaikeyi, his travel across forests with his wife Sita and brother Lakshmana, the kidnapping of his wife by the demon Ravana, the demon king of Lanka resulting in a war with him, and Rama's eventual return to Ayodhya to be crowned king. The Bhagavad-Gita. The Bhagavad-Gita, usually considered part of the 6th book of the Mahabharata, dating from about 400 or 300 BC, is a central text of Hinduism, a philosophical dialogue between Lord Krishna and warrior Arjuna. The Gita discusses selflessness, duty, devotion, and meditation, integrating many different threads of Hindu philosophy. Bhagavad-Gita is revered as a sacred text of Hindu philosophy. The name Bhagavad-Gita, when translated into English, literally means Song of God. Its written format is that of a poem which is 700 verses long. Commonly referred to as the Gita, it is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna which takes place on a battlefield just prior to the start of a climactic war. During the conversation, Krishna proclaims that he is God and at request of Arjuna displays his divine form, which is described as timeless. The conversation summarizes a number of different yogic and Vedantic philosophies, explaining the meaning and purpose of life and existence. It is not exactly clear when the Bhagavad-Gita was written. Astronomical evidence cited in the Mahabharata place the incidents upon which the Gita is based around the time of 3100 to 3150 BCE, while the Puranas suggests a date of 1924 BCE. The discourse on the Bhagavad-Gita begins before the start of the climactic battle at Kurukshetra. It begins with the Pandava prince Arjuna as he becomes filled with doubt on the battlefield. After realizing that his enemies are his own relatives, his beloved friends, and revered teachers, he turns to his charioteer and guide, Krishna, who counsels Arjuna, beginning with the tenet that the human soul is immortal, and human death in the battlefield is just the shedding of the body, but the soul is permanent. Krishna goes on to expound on the yogic path of devotion, action, meditation, and knowledge. Fundamentally, the Bhagavad-Gita proposes that true enlightenment comes from growing beyond identification with the ego, the little self, and that one must identify with the truth of the immortal self, the ultimate divine consciousness. Through detachment from the personal ego, the yogi or the follower of a particular path of yoga is able to transcend his mortality and attachment from the material world and see the infinite. To demonstrate the infinity of the unknowable Brahman, Krishna grants Arjuna the boon of cosmic vision and allows the prince to see himself in all his divine glory. He reveals that he is fundamentally both the ultimate essence of being in the universe and also its material body. This is called the Vishvarupa or Virat-rupa. Gita refers to the war as Dharma Yuddha, meaning just war. In chapter 4, verse 7, it clearly states that God takes incarnation to establish righteousness in the world.